talked a lot about old obscure video games on this channel, some average, others pretty good, be it the mechanics or narrative content, but ultimately they all come across as products at the end of the day. Few of them had actual character or were eclipsed by their contemporaries. This is absolutely not the case for Silverstyl's The Fall, Last Days of Gaia, which had me totally perplexed over how much effort was crammed into a post-apocalyptic RPG that works quite well as a spiritual successor to Fallout 2. If that comparison piques your interest, so will when you hear that a couple of Black Isle devs briefly worked on it. In an era where classic CRPGs are being salivated over, it's hard to believe The Fall will be such an obscure title. That's because it was kind of a disaster. Originally released in 2004, it received very mixed reviews and sales based on how incredibly buggy and crash-prone it was. The limited success in Germany and Russia did prompt Silverstyl to republish not once, but twice as The Fall Extended Edition and Reloaded in 2005 and 6 respectively. The Reloaded Edition has most of the bugs fixed and runs quite smoothly. We're talking maybe a few crashes and only one or two side quests breaking, which is an absolute blessing. Getting a copy is kind of interesting. So I remember there being a whole bunch of the Reloaded version on eBay, but they're kind of absent now, so just nab the OG one. Okay, so you just get a copy and install it. And hey look, it works natively on Windows 10. Surely that's it. You'd be wrong. The Fall was never translated, or at least not ever finished, leaving every version in German, Spanish, or Russian. But as you can see, that's not entirely the case. Over at the No Mutants Allowed forum, some dude did a fan translation of all the text, and as you see, that's quite the achievement on its own. But it doesn't stop there. Apparently there was a semi-official English translation but only released in Taiwan. Alright, what the fuck? Okay, so just get a CD copy of the game files, patch it around to this number, and toss in the fan translation that's floating around. Are we done now? Nope. Now to prevent the game from looking like garbage, instead of just average, you have to search your computer for The Fall Einstell. God fucking damn it. You have to search your computer for The Fall Einstellungen, which allows you to change the resolution, anti-aliasing, and all that. Despite sounding like a headache, it's been made very easy by the Russian blog run by a dude called Set, whose community quite literally mapped out the entire game. Item stats, lore, quests, and host the patch and mod files all translated in English. All you need is just the main files and you can be playing within an hour. This is an absurd amount of dedication to a game that maybe a few dozen people actually finished, let alone explore the entire game world. In my opinion, this makes the game at least worthwhile to know about and discuss. Now, what exactly is The Fall about? So if you played or watched my review of Silverstyl's other post-apocalyptic game, Soldiers of Anarchy, you'll recognize similar writing habits. While in that game it was a massive pandemic, here it's the climate running amok. Much of The Fall's lore is provided via translation on the blog, alongside documentations and occasional NPCs throughout the world. The gist is that the mid-21st century saw the peak of modernity, which brought with increased apathy and detachment, leading to various technological advancements, alongside attraction to cults and increasing rebellious activities. This eventually culminated to a bunch of tree-hugging hippies hijacking a NASA terraforming machine and basically turning the world into a giant sandy ashtray. This kind of sucked and made the world look like Gunsmoke from Trigun, but that's all in the past. The world is kind of fucked, and those that remain are struggling for existence. Even compared to Fallout, it's a lot more grim. There you had towns, an economy, and technology a bit sparse. There's no Brotherhood of Steel here, nor is there any Illuminati conspiracies. As you start up the game, it really is a crapsack world. Your character is a survivor from a village raid that leaves your family murked and you drift into the only established authority around, a seemingly regressive but functioning state, the government of the New Order, made up of mercenaries looking for new blood. Through some nice plot conveniences, you gain command over 5 other hobos and start clearing out the other gangs across the southwestern wasteland with a vengeance. Although, mind you, this is basically being retold by a weird looking grey woman to a child seen in the opening. It gets explained. Aside from this straightforward introduction, there's not much plot for the first half of the game. You'll travel to different locations, meet different people, kill different people, complete quests, and move on to the next area. It's pretty clear Silverstyl chose expediency in getting the player into the game, and that's probably a good thing. Why would any organization trust some loner to lead a squad and take on various important missions? The same reason to stop players from switching off the game. Once the action starts, you naturally become more invested. After about 15 hours, an actual main story emerges beyond killing bandits, which combines the plots of Fallout 1 and 2 together for something that's partially original, yet wholly average. Not to say I wasn't interested, but that's credit to the game's world, which, if I could summarize aptly, feels very handcrafted. The Fall is by no means a pretty game. Blurry textures, stiff models, and tepid sound effects don't help pull you in. But the landscapes you traverse are interesting if you find sparsely populated deserts your jam. The background music isn't too bad either. Gives off a real Lisa the Painful vibe. The inclusion of a German heavy metal song for the opening is pretty neat, though copyright prevents me from playing it. I'd wager more than half the game is totally skippable if you beeline through the main quest, but the game really does incite curiosity. There's a consistent day and night cycle, lots of wide open spaces filled with wildlife and all sorts of ruins that offer more opportunities to explore. Strangely, besides a few items and story missions, there's very little futuristic stuff on offer, a lot of the same 20th century structures and burnt out vehicles. There's dozens of different zones that are packed with heaps of NPCs to interact with and vary in challenges and attitudes. You can go to towns with locals doing the daily routine, working, trading, chilling out in the afternoon. Then there's small hamlets, farmsteads, survivors scavenging, packs of wild children, and Native Americans getting back in touch with their culture. It's all very wholesome and bittersweet, albeit restrictive as you can't outright attack NPCs. I'd imagine this was to stop the game from completely breaking, but it looks pretty odd when a bunch of bandits start a shootout in the town square. As someone who lives in a country that regularly endures climatic shifts in weather and the ever-present risk of losing one's home made me appreciate the sandy desolation just a bit more. One thing you'll notice very quickly when starting up the game is how much can be commented on by your character and the amount of dialogue there is. 2-bit randos have their own conversations or remarks about mundane bullshit, or you can catch full-on conversations. Though dialogue options are limited to you, either being an arsehole or a sarcastic one. I played the game as a female and gender doesn't seem to factor in much, but the option is nice. If you've played any RPGs, you know that reading text is to be expected, as voice acting, even for well-funded projects, is quite expensive and time-consuming. So now look at this shitty Eurojank game being fully voiced, from conversations, descriptions of objects, random NPCs, extending dozens of hours. Considering that the voice acting was only included in the later versions, I want to know what the fuck was going through Silverstyl's mind when they went back to their already failing RPG and decided to sink more money into voicing characters having mild observations of random trash. And this applies to both genders too, so you have hours worth of audio files stacked upon your teammates and every other NPC's useless tidbit. It boggles the mind thinking about it. Not that it really matters because it's all in German, which makes me think if they could, would they have actually voiced the entire game in different languages? You can practically hear the Euros burning. Now I've been talking a lot without saying much about the gameplay, because it's just Fallout's progression system plus Jagged Alliance's squad-based combat. Character progression occurs through combat, completing quests, and doing minor activities. Leveling up initially takes a long time, and you can't perform certain actions like driving cars, repairing items, or even handling explosives without the required skill points or attributes. This is the same for persuasion and conversations, you can't just keep reloading and get lucky. Unlike its contemporaries, there's a lot more emphasis on survivalist methods. Hunting animals rewards meat that can either be traded or cooked for nourishment, natural worlds provide water, and resting leaves you open to being raided unless you set up guards. The degradation of equipment means having someone technically proficient is mandatory to complete certain quests, although most of your own stuff doesn't break. This extends even further into the economy. The absence of money has led to a barter system returning, making every bit of junk actually worthwhile. Water is traded for favors, meat for gasoline canisters, guns for ammunition. This works in balancing the game, as it stops you from just piling up cash and blitzing any encounter and helping the immersion. Why would random disconnected towns have an agreed upon currency? This can be annoying in forcing you to scavenge after every encounter, though it only makes sense for the setting. No one's going to leave perfectly good firearms or food laying around. Without the instruction manual, the game doesn't do a very good job explaining all these intricacies, and since you really can't maximize your character, it's easy to invest into fairly useless skill trees. Any character can use any weapon, and lockpicking can always be successful through repeated attempts or reloading. Perks can be demonstrably more useful than others, like repairing vehicles which constantly suffer attrition. Yet the very detailed repair and crafting system for gear I rarely used aside from the occasional side jobs. A lot of it can feel like the devs were adding features for the sake of it rather than having actual practical purposes. The survival traits perhaps illustrate this the best. In the second half of the game, you're pretty well decked out and don't ever need to search for food, making initial skill investments worthless. Now about those quests, of which there are many, there's a large variety of missions you undertake from minor aid and support jobs to multi-stage journeys that can span whole regions, and this doesn't include the main quest. There's not much branching choice on offer here, thankfully the assortment of characters makes up for this. I've already mentioned the generally somber atmosphere, although that's not saying the game doesn't borrow a lot of the darkly ironic and satirical humour from Black Isle's games. Plenty of questing involves stupid bullshit and pop cultural references. A part of the main quest has you literally cleaning up some hobo, collecting stories for an upstart newspaper company, getting a Komodo dragon for some questionable crackheads, and competing in a gladiatorial ring. Because you unlock new zones or weapons, it doesn't feel like a waste of time either. It's made better by having your character respond to everyone in a very dry, almost sardonic sarcasm, which is perfectly reasonable. I was pretty salty too after my family was massacred. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the writers and the artists, a weighty chunk of the missions are fetch quests which are very tedious, tiring, pace-breaking. The Fall lacks any time compression options outside of combat, meaning you have to hoof across the entire map to pick up some item, turning the game from a 20-hour romp into a 30-hour grind. There are cars that transport you around faster, but fuel and repair concerns will limit their usage. To demonstrate this, while hiking across the map, I actually spent time working on different university assignments, watching YouTube videos, made a cup of tea, and reflected on whether or not I was using my time productively. After considering the boring games people play, I feel pretty good. Either way, to bypass the worst excesses, invest into persuasion. When you're not questing or exploring in the Fall, it's good old-fashioned real-time squad-based combat where you and your 5 other teammates use a massive variety of weapons to take down the opposition. Starting out, you're limited to basic pistols and some melee weapons, before getting access to ballistic armor and assault rifles, and eventually power armor and gas cannons that are thrown in late game. The UI system as a whole functions much like in Jagged Alliance. You issue commands, select equipment, use items, and target enemies all with the mouse. The Fall's combat is all in real time, that you can pause and play, which makes micromanaging your teammates very easy. It's a lot more casual than other titles. There's no delay here when using healing items, so as long as you're stocked up, you'll never die. There's a large number of unlockable teammates throughout the world, many with their own abilities and buffs, which encourages different squad layouts. There are no combat vehicles here unfortunately, it's all on-foot action. Fortunately, there's a huge selection of really cool firearms. You can actually craft silencers, laser sights, underbarreled shotguns and grenade launchers, and even different types of subsonic and dum-dum ammunition. I don't know what's with European games having so many guns in their games, but I ain't complaining. The inventory of your characters isn't half bad either. You can auto-manage items, highlighting guns or ammunition will tell you what they function with, and even if you get over-encumbered, it just makes you move slower, not completely stop. An annoying quirk that's common in a lot of RPGs is you have limited inventory slots that take up an item regardless of actual size, so a piece of paper will use up as much space as a light machine gun. The inclusion of vehicles work as faster transport as well as storage for excess items, crucial in a hobo economy. Despite the appearances, you can't actually use the attached turrets without mods. I've already gushed about how immersive the game is, but animating all the characters slowly pile in and exit can make vehicle usage a bit of a chore. Even when you get driving, the hit detection is all over the fucking place, and you accrue damage all the time bumping onto shoddily programmed debris. Still, one of the better additions is teammates having actual conversations with each other. Some will compliment and support one another, or just simply argue. Reminds me of your haphazard crew in KOTOR. Spending a moment to chat with them is equally worthwhile in fleshing out the personalities, feelings, and ambitions which made journeying with them that much more meaningful. Taken as a whole, there isn't that much combat within the game, and only the last few encounters are particularly challenging, as they should be. Many hours can pass with nary a shot fired, almost playing as a point-and-click title. Wait, what the fuck? Being able to adjust the difficulty any time, various save slots, healing items, and dumb AI you can goad into traps makes it hard to get stuck. Contrary to a lot of Eurojank titles, it actually seems the devs wanted you to finish the game. Before doing this review, I really wanted to get in contact with the developers and just ask them what the fuck was going on. While editing this video, I actually did get in touch with the devs. Because of time constraints on my end, and, them being a little bit busy, I'll instead post the responses, maybe as a comment or in the description. In any case, the issues of the Fall are blatantly clear. This is no gold standard, but definitely could, and I'd argue should, be a cult classic. Much like how movies like Highlander and Event Horizon managed to overcome their lukewarm reception with a creative vision, through redistribution on GOG or Steam, the Fall could find the audience it deserved. This video has taken a long time to put together on account of being so different from anything else I've approached. Sometimes I'm asked why I cover such random, disconnected games, and for me that reason lies in ensuring that people will remember and archive them. Like I said earlier, the effort put in here is clear and is rarely seen and woefully underappreciated. I want to change that. Even though the game clearly isn't for everyone, I'm hoping this video gets shared around so the chances of the Fall being picked up increases. If any of this appealed to you, snag it while you can. Otherwise, my thanks for getting this far. All else I can say is stay safe, stick around, and I'll see you next time. Einstellungen. 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 Fucking what the fuck? Who the fuck